Hello, guys and gals. Me, Mutahara, and I didn't really sleep all that much, or well, I did sleep, but not to the best of my, not as much as I wanted, and that's because I got hacked. Now, ladies and gentlemen, why do I have a cool little smiley green around my face? Well, it's because for me, getting hacked is a great way to explain to you what not to do on a computer. Now, you might know me as the virtual machine guy or the paranoid guy. But in today's day and age, paranoia is just a default requirement, especially when you're using a computer, especially when your computer is the hub for some of the really sensitive stuff you do. You ever sign into a bank? You ever sign into a YouTube channel? You ever sign into your work? You ever do something sensitive on your computer that you don't want getting hacked? Well, you got to take the precautions to protect it. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the reason why I'm making this video today is this is the sandbox Windows virtual machine that I have, okay? Now, this is a hack that happened to me under Windows. As you all know, I'm a Linux guy. I use Arch Linux. And the reason I use Arch Linux is because you literally build it from a command line all the way into whatever experience you want. So this means that I know every single thing that's running on my computer at any single time. There's only a few bits of them, and I know every single one of them, okay? I don't download from a vendor and install whatever they want to install just for ease of use. No, I go through the whole process. Now, this allows me to run whatever I want. With Windows, you don't really get that option. Now, this isn't necessarily a dig at Windows. I think it's really easy to crap on Microsoft all the time. From what I understand, it was their product that actually got hacked by a bunch of Chinese hackers, which led to some purveying around US State Department emails. Wild shit. But to understand when it comes to what happened over here, I was running software underneath this computer, so I must have installed something that installed a driver. And that driver was the hub for malicious tools. So this is a process that definitely involves somebody definitely clicking yes a bunch of times. But to understand the driver situation in Windows, and a driver, for lack of a better term, for just really simplifying this as much as I can, for everyone to understand, think of it like a little piece of software that helps communicate Windows and the hardware-specific features with software. So generally, when you're playing a cool video game on your computer and all the cool little graphics are rendering, that's the game communicating, obviously, with Windows and the graphic driver of your vendor and generating those cool little graphics, okay? Obviously a lot more complicated than what I just said, but you can imagine drivers are a pretty important part of getting your hardware and certain software to converse well within each other, okay? So generally in this case, I had a really shitty piece of software that ended up causing me a little bit of stress. And the reason I ended up isolating this out is underneath an offline scan, which I do from time to time underneath Windows, definitely picked up something that made me clear this virtual machine and restart it from scratch, just because nobody likes having malware run. Now, because it was underneath the virtual machine, obviously I had to stop everything, dump the memory, check the network, examine everything on my computer, which took around 25-30 minutes really, and I found nothing wrong. Nothing was, stolen from me. No tickets were taken. No tokens were stolen. Every single social media and every single account that I had was pretty much safe. Now, again, it's because of containerizing and virtualizing a system that I was safe. Had I been running Windows natively on my computer, bare metal, okay, then I would be pissing and shitting myself, because at that point, who knows what could have gotten stolen? Because whatever was in the virtual machine might have either been touched by hackers or not been touched by hackers, depending on how active this breach was. Now, for those of you who don't understand what this issue is, Microsoft actually has this loophole that's unfortunately been lasting for a few years now. So to understand the drivers that I was talking about, basically hackers will take advantage of signed Windows drivers and utilize a loophole that allows them to sign a driver, install themselves into Windows without really that much stopping them, in the whole process. So to understand a quick idea, this is a write-up from Talos Intelligence. They pretty much tell you how the Windows kernel works, okay? So user mode is where you and I are, okay? So when we fire up an application, we're here. The Windows API communicates to the kernel, okay? The kernel subsystem, which interoperates with those kernel mode drivers. Now, some of these drivers are totally normal. They're cool. Some of them could actually be signed and been used for malicious purposes by actual hackers. And of course, this communicates with the Windows system layer, the hardware extraction layer, and then the actual hardware. So you can see This is where things get pretty scary. Now, this story starts off from like Windows Vista that far ago. Some of y'all weren't even alive for that, to be honest with you. So with Windows Vista 64-bit, they actually had the threat of malicious drivers, and what Microsoft did was they required kernel mode drivers to be digitally signed with a certificate from a verified certificate authority. Now, because of that architecture, you can imagine if these drivers weren't checked or digitally signed and verified, they can cause some serious damage. So with Windows Vista, they specifically required this to be signed with a verified certificate authority. So that's pretty much what we ended up getting into. Now, ladies and gentlemen, with Windows 10, all right, version 1607, Microsoft had actually changed this policy to no longer allow new drivers that were not submitted to or signed by their own developer portal. So to understand, they wanted to also maintain functionality and compatibility with really old drivers. Because guess what? There are a lot of people that use Windows around the world, and there's a lot of people that also use really obscure niche hardware that they need these drivers for it to function. So they ended up having like exceptions, okay? 3 exceptions. One of them was the PC was upgraded from a really early version of Windows to Windows 10. Remember that video I made where I updated from like Windows 1.0 all the way to 10? Some nut job like that, okay? Then you have secure boot off in the BIOS. Most people who purchase a desktop from like the store probably have secure boot on by enabled. You probably might have just heard that secure boot was a thing. The other exception, and this is the one where the loophole is created, drivers were signed with an entity certificate issued prior to July 29, 2015. That changed to a supported cross-signed CA. So to understand, this specific date, July 29, 2015, is a very special date for a lot of disgusting hackers around the world. Now, basically, a few Chinese hackers effectively released a tool, one of them, Jemmy Love Jenny, released a tool known as Hook Sign Tool. Pretty self-explanatory. And because of this one specific tool and using it in conjunction with the Trust Asia code signing tool, and of course, let's not forget utilizing Microsoft Detours, which is a software package for use for instrumenting and monitoring specific Windows API calls. Effectively, all of this combined together, utilizing certain functions like the fuck cert verify time validity, which from what I understand is still active on GitHub, still floating around. Kind of funny how this Microsoft loophole is just sitting freely around another Microsoft-owned product. So in fact, in the write-up it says this allows Hook Sign Tool to pass a custom time in p-time to verify parameter, therefore allowing an invalid time to be verified. To change the signing timestamp during execution, Hook Sign Tool again uses the detour attach function to attach to Windows API function get local time, and detours to another function called get local time. This detour replaces the local time with the date supplied by the user that is within the valid range for the certificate being used. So if you remember that July 2015 address, that's what we're actually getting back into. And of course, this is how a false certificate can be generated into a valid certificate that can be used by, most modern systems. Now, of course, to actually forge this, you would actually also require a non-revoked code signing certificate that was expired or issued before that July 2015 date specifically, along with a private key and passwords. So, of course, there were a few names that were brought up, a few certificates that appeared to actually be used to help forge the signature, and some of the companies that they belonged to were things like Shenzhen Luyu Dashi Technology Corporation Limited, Zhuhai Lansheng Technology Corporation Limited, and of course, a bunch of just, you can imagine, Chinese company names and Chinese certificates that were used in conjunction to create some really, really scary drivers that could be used to actually rootkit actual systems. Now, generally, it seems like a lot of this is also used to bypass DRM, but generally, the actual threat here is installing a malicious driver, as I appear to have done in my actual Windows sandbox, can pose a serious threat to your kernel level system. It can provide an actual hacker kernel level access, which again, if you really want to get to the nitty-gritty, means they have nearly unfettered access into your computer. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you're freaking out wondering, whoa, could this affect me? Well, if you go to Windows right now, you can actually run a defender check, an offline check, and if you do have anything malicious installed onto your computer, then this will help you hopefully identify it. Now, I want to stress for the record, if you are somebody that has found software like this, I'm just going to say it. You probably might be somebody that has installed cheating software onto your Windows installation to cheat video games, all right? That's one of the biggest use cases. So this might even be a self-report for a lot of people. Now, me, I come across this stuff because I do a lot of virus investigations. So from time to time, I will have just malware installed and sitting unfettered on actual virtual machines, okay? It's not something that I should be doing, but I understand the consequences of what I play around with, so I'm not terribly super duper worried. Again, virtual machines weren't exactly a end-all be-all. You'll see some things can still escape virtual machines through various vectors. Be very careful on how you use and play around with malware. In fact, if you don't know what you're doing, don't fuck with them at all. So of course, there are a few fixes. Microsoft recommends blocking rules for certain drivers. So for instance, if you go into your Windows Defender like control, you can actually enable a few things that will actually block off certain parts of your computer. And then of course, they also actually have a block list enabled by default into Windows anyway. So chances are, if you have everything set to defaults and you're not playing around with critical settings, you should be fine, okay? I want to speak on this on behalf of some of the clickbait you might find on the internet that'll tell you how dangerous this can really be. Don't get me wrong, it's dangerous, but I think for most people, in my opinion, should relatively be fine. However, if you are installing shadier software, if you are installing third-party software, maybe that one specific thing that needs driver installation, anytime you install signed or unsigned drivers, be very careful. Again, never install a driver unless you absolutely know you need it, okay? And you absolutely can trust that it's coming from a verified individual, okay? The only driver that I install on my system that is not owned by me, that is not open source, comes directly signed by NVIDIA every time I install it, okay? That is the only attack vector that I open for myself. And that's only because I'm a gamer, okay? I play video games on my computer. It helps to have a goddamn graphics driver in the first place, okay? Everything else, I'm very careful playing around with, especially on my host system. Of course you wouldn't understand, Siri, you're an Apple. Anyways, so to understand, Microsoft even has told everyone in the last couple days, there are some drivers being used maliciously. No shit. In these attacks, the attacker gained administrative privileges on compromised systems before using the drivers, which is important to actually understand. This requires user input from what I have understand. So if you're installing software that leads to you installing a driver, do not just click yes a million times. Put in the actual effort in your brain to actually verify what you are installing on your system is totally halal and kosher. If it isn't, your computer is going to be doing a lot of haram things. Microsoft has completed its investigation to determine that the activity was limited to the abuse of several developer programmer accounts and that no Microsoft account compromise has been identified. So of course, Microsoft is kind of plugging this up as we speak, but unfortunately this loophole still exists in large. And again, I know you might be wondering, why doesn't Microsoft just stop it? Look, Microsoft's not stupid. These people are very, very intelligent. The problem is, this is a whack-a-mole approach because a lot of drivers exist before that date that are actually used by, professionals and personal people around the world to run specific niche things day in and day out. And Microsoft can't just enable like this draconian, almost Gestapo level approach on its operating system. Otherwise, there's no difference between them and Apple. And unfortunately, until Windows changes itself around, and I don't even know if possible then because they have to maintain compatibility, this is going to be a gaping goatsy that will exist till the end of time. So yeah, ladies and gentlemen, I want to take this time to get really technical with you, explain how I ended up getting hacked, and why I'm not so terribly worried. But if you're a Windows user and you may have potentially installed some shadier software, look, maybe you might have downloaded a certain, repack off the internet, maybe you played a certain game, maybe you're a degenerate multiplayer piece of shit, maybe you might have installed just some weird software or weird driver. Be very careful, because there's a pretty healthy chance then that your information is getting siphoned. I'm a virus investigator. It's gonna happen to me at some point. But ladies and gentlemen, as long as you're on the internet and you're on a computer, just be careful. A little bit of paranoia is always good. That said, though, this is me, Mutahar, gonna put the tinfoil hat on. Got some PlayStation emulation videos to cover, and there might be some alien footage that I got to look at too. Anyways, if you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike to dislike, and I am out.